You're listening to the Ropes N Riffs podcast with your host, John Kiernan.
We are back for another episode of the Ropes N Riffs podcast. It's so good to be hanging out with you today. If you are somebody that's been listening to these episodes, welcome back. Or if you're brand new to the Ropes N Riffs podcast and this is your first episode, welcome. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the team. I'm glad that you're here. I, for one, am excited, and I hope you will be too, to have the conversation today with the one and only Christina Rotondo. Now, you may already be familiar with Christina's work, or you may already be familiar with it and not even know it. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you've definitely heard and probably have even seen her in the Doctor Who ecosystem. She's lent her voice to Doctor Who, and she was even on screen for Doctor Who playing a character. What character? You got to listen to the episode and find out. Hey, it's you again. I am so happy that you're here today. How's it going, guys? Ladies and gentlemen, we are back on another episode of the Ropes N Riffs podcast. Thank you for joining me today. My name is John Kiernan, your resident entrance theme song composer. And today I am speaking to Christina Rotondo. Many of you may know her for the work that she did on Doctor Who in a couple of different episodes, both in music, and she was on set as a character. Which character? You got to listen to the episode and find out. She's done lots of different voiceover work, lots of different covers, as you've seen on YouTube and on social media. You've probably run into a lot of her Sleep Token covers and Linkin Park covers, which are all awesome. And if you haven't, go ahead and check that out. And we get into some conversation about how she chooses them and how she navigates this crazy music industry, not just in covers, but on Patreon, being a wedding singer and performer, and so much more. I'm excited for you to join me on this episode of the Ropes N Riffs podcast, as you have been, or if you're new, welcome to the show. As always, you can check out the Ropes N Riffs podcast on any player, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube, or on your favorite app. You may have an app that I don't know about, but I'm pretty sure that you can find Ropes N Riffs on there. But it's a great conversation we have here with Christina. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and consider leaving us a review on any of the podcasting platforms and leave us a 5-star review while you're there. If you leave a comment on any of these platforms, I'll go ahead and read it out on the show here as well. Anyone that donates $10 or more gets a shout out on the show to the PayPal Ropes N Riffs. That's ROPES, the letter NRIF. Now, without any further ado, once again, thank you for checking out this episode and enjoy the conversation with Christina Rotondo. So, on your website, at the bottom, it says, Christina is the difference between good and the best. If you want the best, look no further. And I'm going to tell you, from us working together so far and just from hearing you and hearing all the covers that you've done and just everything, that statement's true. I don't even need to introduce you because that's enough to introduce you.
Thank you so much. For a second, I was like, did I write that? And then I remembered it's a quote, that someone sent me. So, whew.
Imagine if you did and you're just like,
I know.
Totally me.
And I'm like, oh my God, I just wrote that myself, or like I just generated it or something. Yeah, no, that didn't do that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really cool to see all of the things that you've been doing. And, we've just recently met, but, for me, when I'm looking up, well, the one thing I always tell people is I'm like, social media is the coolest stuff in the world, because when you're looking at the world of music and you're looking at all the talent out there and you're looking at all these great people to work with, or just even someone that comes across the algorithm, because we are slaves to the algorithm now, it's just cool. It's like, oh, who's this person? Oh my God, they're covering Sleep Token and It sounds awesome. So I'm so glad that we've been able to cross paths recently.
Yeah, this has been really, really cool. I think like the way that I see social media is like it's like a portfolio. So just like I just constantly just keep churning out content on there and just hope that the right people see it eventually.
What's been your favorite thing that you've done on socials? Because over on YouTube, over on Instagram and TikTok and all these things, you've been doing obviously a lot of covers, a lot of originals. And the way that I had heard about you originally was through the stuff you were doing with Sleep Token. And being able to see your take on that, and a lot of the response to your Sleep Token covers has been incredibly positive.
Yeah, it's difficult because like I think like social media has definitely taken a bit of a change recently. Like I used to primarily focus on like long form content, and I would mainly do like longer YouTube covers, and then I would cut them down and then kind of put them onto like TikTok or whatever it might be. I actually only kind of like recently started uploading to TikTok. But like now I'd say I'm very much focused on like short form, and short form's really fun because you don't have to spend a whole ton of time perfecting something and then spending absolutely ages on it, or putting it out and it kind of being like what you think might be subpar because you want to get this really long video out and you have to dedicate all this time to it. Because with short form you can kind of just like, because it's such a short section, you can like I can add in like so many different layers and like extra backing vocals and stuff that I maybe wouldn't have the time to if it was like a longer form content. So like at the moment, like I'm really enjoying pretty much all of the short form content that I do, whether that is covers or like even just like the behind the scenes of work stuff. Like when I'm working and playing gigs physically and I record, come spend a day with me. Like that's really fun to do because I'm also working at the same time, and then I get to show people like what I'm doing behind the scenes.
And for those who are just becoming familiar with your work, you do everything within the music industry.
Yeah.
You're doing the covers on social, you're doing the covers everywhere, you're recording, you're doing session work, and you're in a wedding band also. And you're in a couple of different bands, and you've done stuff for TV. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you have run the gamut and continue to run the gamut of lots of different things within the industry.
Yeah, I say this to everyone that asks me about making money in music. But when I was younger and I was in like touring bands, the thought process was very, very much if you were to make money or to make music your job, then you would make money by monetizing what you were currently doing. So like in that band, like you would just get to the stage where you were touring and making loads of money from that. And then as you kind of like creep out of that just for fun music stage where you actually start thinking about how to make money in music like as a future or whatever that might be, you realize that it's literally about making money as a musician, not just making money in the music that you are currently doing. So whether that is like session work, sync work, working like with companies like TV adverts, jingles, whatever it might be, it is literally about being a musician and using your skills in order to do all these really cool things.
Yeah, I tell people that similarly. And, a couple people in my life I think really helped shape that for me. One of them is my friend Tina, who works with Hans Zimmer. She's the cellist for them. And then another person was this gentleman named Chance Thomas, who's a video game composer. And there's this conference over in the US called Game Sound Con, where all of the video game composers and people within the video game industry go and talk about sound, music, everything relating to that industry. And I remember Chance, and I always blow him up for this because I'm just like, it was such a different dynamic. He was on a panel on making money in the industry of video game music and video game sound design, things like that. And there were a couple different people on stage who were just like, if you're in this industry to make money, you're in the wrong industry. And, I think we all understand that from an artistic perspective, right? The art comes first, that kind of thing. But as a musician, you need to be able to create income to continue to do the thing that you do, right? And I remember that he was on stage and he's just like, all right, cool. Pulls up a PowerPoint and he's like, if you're just starting off, this is what you should charge. These are the steps and this is the way that I do it. And it was just so revitalizing to basically see somebody turn around and be like, not necessarily here's a step process, but yeah, you need to make money. Otherwise you can't do the thing. And here are some of those different price points that would work for me. Here's why I've chosen this at this stage. If you're just starting out, here's why you would choose this. If you're not starting out, here's this. And it even went down to the minutia of if you're creating sounds, not just the music, but here's how to price out each of them. Here's how to do a package. Here's why you would do a discount as opposed to free, or free as opposed to it was just like such a light bulb moment of there's so many different things that you can do in the industry. And there is money in the industry, definitely. It's just, you can't just see yourself as your own artistic solo vision. You have to see yourself and go, what can I do with music? And how, as a musician, can I leverage that skill set all over? Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you say that he wasn't afraid to kind of be like, okay, well, this is how you can make money in music, because that whole phrase of, well, if you're making money in music, then you're in the wrong industry. Like I've had people say varieties of that to me so many different times, but normally like it might come from, I don't know, like someone who is like trying to orchestrate a session or something, and they're like, oh, for example, like as a singer, the kind of comment that I get is like, oh, well, if you're making money from it, then like you're not just doing it for the passion of it. Or, people that want free sessions and they're like, oh, well, you should just be doing it because you're passionate about it. And I'm like, well, let's not forget that you are also entitled to make money off of music. Like just because you make money off of it, it doesn't mean that you're no longer emotionally involved in the actual music itself.
Right, absolutely. And my wife and I, as you know, run a music school, and as many of the listeners here know, we run a music school here. And some of my favorite students to teach personally in my studio are composition students. And there's a couple of students who, in the comp world, we've gone over lots of different elements of obviously composition, songwriting, things of that nature. And what I always try to instill upon them, especially one of my students who just graduated, who's going to Berkeley in the fall, Berkeley College of Music, one of the things that I tell them is I go, listen, when I give you an assignment for composition, it's a little bit different than our technical piano or guitar lessons. And I break it down into two things. And I reference a lot of the wrestling music that I do. I go, look, there's work music and there's artistic music. And the work music, these are the pieces that someone requests that you do or that you're being paid to do. And they usually have different parameters. Here's what's going to happen here. Here's what may not happen here. Here's the time frame. And you have to flip it around by X time. Your artistic expression and the stuff that you do out of the goodness of your heart, you could spend years doing that. You could do whatever you want on that. But the mindset that you have and the vision that you have for that is a very different mentality. And it's not to say one is better than the other. It's not to say that you should prioritize one more than the other. It's just, it's two sides of the same coin. As a musician, if you want to just do your own thing, that's totally cool. But understand that puts you more in what I would call like being an artist as opposed to just being a musician. When you're a musician, there's all of these different things that you can do. And if you want to make music the income that you do, you got to learn how to kind of separate that line between work music and the artistic music.
Yeah, and this is also why I say to people, I've had the conversation quite recently as well, where I always say you're entitled to have your own artistic profile, your own artist identity. So for example, like as a session vocalist, like the way I kind of word it is I say to people like, when I say to them, oh, you can either you can have me as like a feature artist, or you can include me in like the information, but like I'm not going to be a primary artist, so it's not going to show up on my Spotify. And if so every now and then someone will query that and they'll think it's personal, and I just say, do you know what, like, look, let's imagine that every single session I ever did was on my profile page. Like it would just be a mess of genres. It would be too conflicting. People would be confused as to what is my music, what is not my music, what have I written, what haven't I written. And I think everyone is entitled to their own musical identity. And I think you summed it up perfectly. Like just because you're separating what is your work music and what is your passion project. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like sometimes they can overlap. Like at the moment I've got a couple of projects on, and same with the kind of wrestling music. Like it's all like very rock oriented. It's orientated. It's very like focused in like genres that I like as a part of like my personal music. But I think everyone should definitely be able to have like that split down the middle where they go, okay, great, I can channel work music now and I can channel like personal music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact too that you can have your own artistic profile that has all of these different things, and then you can subdivide into whatever you need to. And for me, the fact that when we started talking, you were like, oh man, I do wedding gigs too. I'm just like, wedding gigs are the most fun I have.
Fun. Yeah, like we don't even do a lot of rock at weddings. Like that's only kind of been a recent thing. Like a lot of it is like, just like pop or like even like dance stuff. Like it's completely different genre, or like, very soft and very pretty, like what people typically want at a wedding. But like even just doing like sessions and wedding stuff, like I'm constantly singing live, so I have to kind of like it's like an adjustment of like constantly keeping my voice or my like make sure that they work well. And I think that's helped me with like session work and stuff, because I'm constantly singing in so many different genres, and at the end of the day, like all of that helps as well.
Yeah, and I have to ask, obviously, as someone who also plays in wedding bands, what is one or some of your best wedding performance moments?
Ooh, do you mean like what part of the day or like song?
Let's say, so I'll break it up into two because I think it's going to be a pretty fun kind of conversation. What are some of the funnest wedding songs for you to do in your catalog?
Okay, so at the moment we're doing a lot of like alternative rock and metal stuff. So that's really fun to add in, like a lot of like Sleep Token. And I'm kind of just now starting to like feel comfortable with them because this is something else as well that me and my guitarist were literally talking about today. But like, even though we are pro wedding musicians, it is not as easy as just playing a song and it sounding amazing. And he said something to me when we were in the car like the other week, and he was like, it's really interesting because whenever someone requests a custom song, that is going to be the worst we're ever going to play it. Because if you think about it, like you'll do your practice and then you'll do it live, and then like that's the first time that you've ever really performed it, and only when you continue, like you're going to get better every time you play it, right? But like in terms of the stuff that we have been doing for a while, stuff like old school like 80s stuff, like a lot of like Fleet, or like 70s, like a lot of like Fleetwood Mac or like Luther Vandross, like Never Too Much, because it's also funky, and I'm just like, you know, it's playing in my head at the moment, and you just want to jig along to it. Like that stuff is so fun. Just like, you know, never too much vibes. Yeah, you just really want to vibe it out. It's so fun.
Love that. And I think, again, with wedding music, you can get custom songs that people are just like, hey, go ahead and do this. You can have your own roster of music. And, you know, I think that when you are doing this professionally, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, right? You end up having this continuation of always using your instrument and always trying things. So your guitarist was just like, hey, this is probably the worst we're ever going to sound with it.
Yeah.
But your worst for you guys is probably like a 9.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, man, like this still sounds great. But you guys are sitting there like, I hope they like it. And they're just like, this is so good.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, to be fair, like I record a lot of our stuff now, and it's so funny because, like, for example, last year, we did this wedding, and I remember, like, on the day of the wedding, I was just super unwell. I was not feeling good, and usually, like, when that happens, and I feel like I'm not performing my best, because you know, touch wood, we've not had to like, you know, cancel a wedding because of illness, but you know, I'm sure at some point in our career it may happen. But it was so unwell, and I was like, oh man, I'm really not performing this very well. Like they had Taylor Swift walking down the aisle, and I love Taylor Swift and I sing it a lot, but it just was not sounding good. And so like I'll kind of have like a little pep talk to myself, and I'm like, look, you know the situation, this is how I feel it went. And I kind of said to myself, if they message me and they say, hey, this wasn't what we expected, we didn't really like it, I would have been like, okay, I'll give you a refund because I was ill and it can't be helped, it is what it is. And then and then I recorded everything, but because I was so ill and I really didn't want to look back at it, and we'd just gone on holiday and stuff, I think like 2 months later I looked back at the recordings, and what I thought was my absolute worst was actually really not that bad at all. But like as like fresh, you've definitely got you've got a standard that you kind of like hold yourself to. And I can't remember who said it once. I watched it, I think, on a video ages ago, and they said something along the lines of, you are only as good as your last performance, and like what people have seen of you. And it's so funny because like I thought that we'll do gigs, and there are some gigs and I'll be like, oh my God, we smashed it. Like we did this gig at the weekend, and it was just flawless. 10 out of 10, chef's kiss, best vocal performances I've ever done. It was so good. And then there are some gigs that you do and you're just like, man, that was awful. But most of the time people are really enjoying what you're doing, but it's just because you as a musician have got this standard of where you think you should be. And if you feel like you're not 100%, or you feel like something's a bit wobbly or it's too hot or something like that, then in your mind it's like, oh my God, it sounds awful.
Yeah, you're your own worst critic. Not
Yeah.
you specifically, but like a person is their own
Yeah.
worst critic. There was a gig that I did a couple of years ago where, for a wedding gig, it was this thing where they called it like a hybrid wedding band, which was weird because there were like 9 of us still on stage, but they were like, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead and have the musicians, but we'll have some of the track playing along and things like that. And I was like, okay, cool. That probably means that there are going to be 2 or 3 of us on stage, and you know, we're going to go ahead and have some of the instrumentals filled in. There were still like 9 of us on stage. There was a drummer, the bongo drummer, there was a saxophonist, there was a violinist, there was me, and we're playing songs like Uptown Funk and things like that. But because there was stuff in the back, I'm like, all right, cool. We're tapping, we're going to do some crazy stuff. And we didn't get called out on it. It was fun. And I was just like, man, this is some really cool stuff. But it's not always like, sometimes you got to stick to the letter of the law with it. Sometimes they're very specific on like, what they want. But like you said, you're sitting there sometimes you're like, man, that was not cool. And then other times you watch it back and you're like, you know what? That wasn't as bad as I thought it was,
Yeah.
because you are your own worst critic. And, I think sometimes as artists, no matter what we do, we'll always listen back and we'll hear the flaws and we're just like, man, I could have done way better with that. But a lot of the times it's just like we were in the studio, the other people weren't. We were on stage, the other people weren't. And it just gives you this interesting perspective on your own performance.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's just, do you know what? I think if you're not criticizing your work, at least sometimes as a musician, then you're probably, maybe it could be that it's something that like you're really not that into, or like you don't really have that much of like, you don't really care that much about. Like for me, like if I'm writing a song, like my own work or something, and I like really don't care that much about it, then it's probably like, I don't know if this is the one for me. But then again, when I listen to a track, I feel like I can pretty much instantly know if I'm going to vibe with it or not. Like, there have been songs, I mean, there's actually one right now, and literally after this, it's actually on my to-do list for today. Like I need to get back to writing for my band. It's just me and a guitarist. We are like, we're just a two-piece, and like he's really loving it, and I am just like, oh man, I'm having such a hard time with this track, like this one track in particular, like I just cannot. And so the motivation to get back to it and like continue working on it is so hard, because I'm not clicking with it. I am pulling apart everything that I write, and I just need to be like, right, just get in the session and just whatever happens. Like it just needs to come out. And sometimes it's just like that.
Yeah, totally. And, sometimes I tell, again, going back to comm students, I tell them all the time, I go, listen, sometimes you got to write for like 15, 20, 30 minutes and write the bad stuff, because then all of a sudden you'll get that nugget where it happens. I'm just like, years ago, Jeff Loomis, who's the guitarist in Nevermore, Arch Enemy, all these different things, he was just like, sometimes I'll just throw on my voice memos for an hour and shred, and like 58 minutes of it is terrible. And then there's a few minutes that all of a sudden become a song on the record, and I really jive with that. And it's like, you just have to really find your process in terms of like getting that stuff out and being able to get what you think is like the positive stuff, what you think is like the good stuff. And it's going to be different for everybody. But I think a lot of the times, if you're just going to go with what's first, sometimes it's good. But a lot of the times you got to have that process there. And, for you, you've done so much. And I want to get a little bit into some of the work you did with Doctor Who and some of those things, because you haven't just done things with music. You've done a lot of different things. And let's start with some of the Doctor Who stuff too, because I had no idea that you had done some work for that. How did that come to be, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I was originally, I've done two bits of work with them, and the first time I was hired from, I believe it was a production company that help and or do some of the audio engineering for Doctor Who. So I don't know exactly how much they do for it, but it was a company that basically, it wasn't Doctor Who directly. So they reached out to me and they were like, hey, this is the brief, just bog standard session work, but I wasn't told anything about the actual work, which again is very common. Like in session work, a lot of the time people will just kind of like, they'll give you like a really rough, it's for this, or they won't really give you that much information. But I had like no information. The only brief was like, don't change your voice. We, sing it like you would normally sing it. And yeah, that was pretty much it. And then I got the lyrics, and this was for, the episode was called The Church on Ruby Road. So it was about some goblins, but I didn't know that at the time. And I got the lyrics and I was like, what is this? And I was kind of just like, okay, whatever. Like a lot of the time, like you get personal projects and it's just people, like we said, like just getting their ideas out, just whatever they want to do, and it's my job to sing, not judge. I don't judge. Like, you're hiring me to sing a song and that's awesome. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is going to be used for, but fine, no problem. Did a little bit of a sample and then sent it over, and then it kind of all went from there.
That's awesome. Now, if you would have known it was about goblins, would that have changed your delivery at all? Or do you think that you'd have been like, yeah, I got that. Like what I said was good.
Do you know what? Like, I think because they said to me, don't change how you sing, I think if they'd have given me too much information, I probably would have thought too much about it. Because I remember with this one, like, I treated the session just like I would have done for anyone. Like, as I'm sure anyone else out there doing music, I mean, maybe not, but I have my own boundaries when it comes to music. I have my own fees. I have what I will accept, what I won't accept. And it was no different for this. So, like, for example, I think the initial inquiry, I think they potentially wanted a free sample as a rule of thumb. I don't do free samples for people that I don't know because I don't already have no history of working with you. I don't, you know, some people will do free samples and they won't even say thank you for your time. And that can be a bit frustrating. But like, you know, if it was a friend reaching out to me, yeah, I'll do a free sample for you, or someone that I worked with before, because we've done that before and I'm happy to help. And I think if I remember correctly, I think, you know, they weren't really sure, but they ended up paying for the sample and that was great. But I think had I have known that it was for like this big potential thing, I possibly would have been inclined to either do it for free or maybe like change how I sang it. And I think in this situation, I think not knowing was the right call, because I think otherwise I probably would have got into my head a little bit potentially.
Sure. But you're also highlighting something that I think is important about that, because I think there's a lot of people in the industry who go, if it's a big project, I have to do this for free. Otherwise, there's hundreds and millions of other musicians who will get the gig.
For
And
sure.
maybe that's true with some people and some not. But at the same time, I think you and I both in professionals in this can think of projects that we've done for free, think of projects that were very well paying or decently paying. And it really varies on the project. But I think that if you know what you're worth and you know, hey, this is my time, this is my scope, it also makes you look more professional if you're like, hey, for this, here's what this is. And, you know, I think there are people that will, starting out, post some irrational number for something like that. And that's different. It's different to understand what you should charge or what you think you should for this, or these kinds of different elements, right? But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with, like you said, saying, hey, for us to do this demo or this sample, here's what this would look like. But at the same time, too, you know, you're at a point too where you're putting out your own music. You have all this lead on socials, on YouTube, and, you know, on Spotify, on Apple Music, all those things. So at the same time, it's not like people don't have those references. And that's something I tell people all the time. I go, listen,
Yeah.
people will want something for free, I think, a lot of the time intrinsically, because that's some of how this industry and the artistry sometimes goes. But, you know, if you have this pool of stuff that you've done that you can lean on, you're like, hey, you know how I sound. You know what I mean? You know how I sound. And within reason, if you're somebody that's just doing metal, which you don't do, you do lots of different things, including that. But if you're just like, hey, someone wants me on a jazz track and there's no jazz stuff that I have, maybe that's when there's a consideration. But if it's like, hey, I have a pool of dozens of songs and dozens of references, and you can hear me, not me, you, because I don't sing, I play guitar. You can have all of these different things that you can send people. Hey, you know how I sound. This is my process, and here's why I'm asking for that. I think that's really important. And, you know, even though you're not dealing directly with Doctor Who, I foresee that that's a big reason why they're like, hey, you know, that's fair. Let's keep moving forward with this. And you said you've done two things. Were both of those done through that same company, or was it once you did this one, they came back to you and said, hey, let's rock and roll on the next one?
Yeah, so the second one, which was aired only very recently, that was done directly through the producer. So the producer reached out to me and she said, hey, we've got this role, we want you to jump in on it. And then I only recently found out, really, because there was like a behind the scenes video that went out. And it's so nice because they're talking about me, but obviously I'm not there. And, you know, we cut because when I was on set that day, because I was actually in the episode, I met the producer and the writer, Russell T. Davies. He came up to me on set whilst I was all in my prosthetics and everything, and we were having a chat. And then it cuts to the producer of that season, I believe. He's called Ben. And they're talking about basically why they hired me for this one. And they basically say like, oh, you know, she was so enthusiastic and she had obviously had so much fun doing this one that when we had like this other character come up, like we knew we had to ask Christina. And I was like, oh my God, that's so nice.
You're like, that's me.
That they're talking about me. Yes.
That's so cool. And for those who, everybody's into Doctor Who, but for those who aren't familiar with Doctor Who, what is the character, or where is the character? Where can they find it?
So it is on an episode called the Interstellar Song Contest, and the character is Liz Lizardine. She appears, I think, probably like in the first half an hour or so. The song contest is kicking off, and she's one of the contestants. And after she sings, everything breaks loose. So it's right before then.
That's awesome. Now, there's something on your Instagram profile, which me having kids now, and one of them being in kindergarten, one of the things they talk about all the time is Roblox.
Uh-huh.
So, we must talk about that.
Okay.
I have no background on anything Roblox,
Okay.
personally. My son's just like, my friends were talking about this. I'm like, should they be talking about it? You're into Pokemon. So that's what you're doing too. I'm into Pokemon too, guys. But, talk to us a little bit about some of the stuff you've done for Roblox and a little bit on how that came to be too.
Okay, cool. So my work with Roblox, so I met a really cool a dev of Roblox. He I think, if I'm please correct me if I'm wrong, anyone here, but I believe that he does dev work as well as the music in Roblox, and it's specifically in Piggy. And in Piggy you have chapter 12, and you have the true ending. So you have the ending, and then you have a hidden ending. And when you beat Tio and you reach the hidden ending, that's where our song happens. And it's so funny because we talk about this all the time, and it's so funny because like it was really popular when it got released, and then it was like all, like, I mean, everyone's still loving it. I did a live version on YouTube that I put out. I did like a one take live version of it just for funsies because everyone was really enjoying it. And all of a sudden, like, my phone is constantly pinging at the moment. Like, I don't know why. Like, I don't know if everyone's reaching the hidden ending or what is happening, but like it goes like that constantly, and it's so popular. And I think Bobby posted about it literally last week. I believe it's just reached like 4 million views on YouTube. So yeah, super super popular. Everyone is really enjoying it, which is so fun and so fab. And then I've done some other small bits as well. So I've also done a little bit of voiceover work, but yeah, just like here and there. But it's mainly the hidden ending. But I'd love to do more stuff like that. I mean, I love video game stuff. It's so
Yeah, the video game world is super cool. And, a lot of my background in terms of what got me into music was video game music and just things in video games in general. I wish I had time to play more. And I think everybody who's artistic and whatnot has some sort of that element to them. Wrestling is kind of like that. So I
Yeah.
guess that's
it's like the same niche, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like a sub niche, yeah.
Yeah, and I think video game music can be so expressive, and things you can do in video games are so different. For me, my biggest video game music ever is from the Final Fantasy series,
Ooh.
right? Yeah, Nobuo Uematsu, it's just incredible. And tying it into the wrestling thing for those listening, obviously y'all know Kenny Omega, Nobuo Uematsu, new theme. We'll talk about it later. But there's all this cool stuff. Like Kenny Omega ended up having Nobuo Uematsu, the composer from Final Fantasy, not compose the theme, but he was the voice that you hear say his name in the new theme. And the new theme just rocks. And you can tell that there's this intersect, like you said, in all these different things. For me, I'm like, without video game music, I don't know that I fall in love with music, and I don't know that I continue down these different roads here. But yeah, video game music is awesome. And for me, like, how far disconnected I am from Roblox, I always get it confused with Minecraft, and it's totally not. I know it's not.
I'm the same. So fun fact, no one please come for me, but it's the same for me with like the Doctor Who stuff. Like I feel like in the UK you either grew up watching Doctor Who because that's what your parents like watched and you watched it as a family.
Right.
I didn't watch Doctor Who growing up. I'm very much like in the Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, Tomb Raider kind of category of like gaming, but like Roblox, never. And everyone's like, have you played it before? And I'm like, no.
That's going to be one of the things afterwards. I'm just like, is there one thing you regret saying? You're going to be like, damn, the Roblox thing.
Everyone's going to hear this and they're going to be like, what do you mean?
But so what is your favorite video game of all time then? Or what are some of your favorite video games? Because you named some
Zelda.
bangers.
Yeah,
Nice.
Legend of Zelda, like Ocarina of Time, yes, on like whatever platform. Well, I think I used to have like a variety, but like, just on like the little like Nintendo. What would it have been then? Like a cross between like the Nintendo like DS Lite, all of that stuff was like the Game Boy Color and all of that stuff, that was a
Yeah, totally.
vibe. Yeah, it kind of started with like Pokemon on like the Game Boy Color, and then it progressed. And then when we got like our big boy like console, like it was, I mean, pretty much like Far Cry, Lara Croft, like Tomb Raider, and there's something else, and I've forgotten it. But like that Last of Us, like stuff like that. There was a brief period where I worked at a game. I don't think you guys have it. I think your equivalent would be like GameStop, but it was like a gaming store, like the biggest
Yeah,
gaming store.
GameStop is here in the States, yeah. Or
Yes.
was before they went under, but yeah.
Yeah, so
for
I
sure.
think we just had like a game which was the same equivalent, and like I was like, yes, I can finally like channel my inner Tomb Raider one day, and like the Tomb Raider release came out, and I was obviously the only girl that worked in the store, and I was like, I'm gonna be Lara Croft today. Yeah, that was a vibe. Yeah.
That's so cool. And I love that you named all those different ones. Pokemon for me right now is close because my son is really into Pokemon. And it started just like in school when he would do good, they gave points for like, oh, you did this and you get this. And you could either choose like lunch with the teacher or something or Pokemon cards. And he wasn't into Pokemon before the cards, but I think he saw one. He's like, oh, that's cool. And then he got it. And then he did well like the next day. And then he got like four more. And I'm like, dude,
It
how
all
did you get like
started.
yeah, and then he all of a sudden started getting the cards and everything. I was like, you don't understand. Your dad used to be a Pokemon master when he was young. Like I was like all into like blue and red and silver and gold and all those and up to Ruby and Sapphire. And then all of a sudden, like he gets super into it. And he now has like Let's Go Pikachu. And he's like, Dad, what's this? And I'm like, Let's Go Pikachu is basically red and blue. So here's what you do. You need to go here where you need to get this, this, and this. And now like he
Nice.
and I are like super back into it. He's like, Dad, can I play Go? I'm like, oh yeah. So like we're working on that. But yeah, Pokemon is he's super into. And you brought up Zelda earlier too. Zelda for me is fun because like I was an Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask person. And after those, I had kind of fallen off of Zelda. Years go by teaching guitar students. One of my students is two sisters, right? And they both love Zelda. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Let's learn Saria's song because you're learning to sight read. We can do everything in basically open position. It's cool. And she's like, what is Saria's song? I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean, what is Saria's song? And I play it for her. She goes, oh, that's not what it's called now. And I'm like, that's not what it's called now. And I'm like, I haven't gone to like fact check this 11-year-old child yet. But I'm just like, should I? But like, once you start playing it, you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I love how Zelda's continued on over the course of time too. Like, there are some games that are evergreen, and Zelda just continued on.
Yeah, agreed. It's one of those like classic ones, I think, that will always just, you know, be amazing. Like I'm almost like excited to see what they do with it next.
Absolutely. Now, with a lot of the covers that you've started to do, you have so many different things. You talked about the wedding band before. You have a successful Patreon, and I always tell anybody who's doing awesome on those platforms, congratulations, because I think a lot of people think that, okay, you just put it up and people sub. No, it's work. And anyone that really does well with a Patreon and all that, it's just, it deserves all the accolades and all of the congratulations in the world for those. And I saw that recently you did a wedding for one of your subscribers also. Is that true?
Yes, I've actually started doing that quite a lot recently. So I think that would have
That's a hook real
been,
quick. Subscribe to my Patreon. I'll play at your wedding.
yeah, I had a little perk in there. So I think that would have been Brad's wedding, but I did one literally last week. So I'll reference that one because it was like the most recent one that I've done. But these guys were in Aberdeen. So for context, the UK is definitely not as big as America at all. So this was like pretty much the furthest you can go. So I'm in the middle of the UK, like a 7-hour drive to me.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, like what, one way, 7 hours. It was great. I loved doing it. It was fabulous. I both hired one of my friends to help me out with some instrumentals, and I also composed a couple. So I did like a piano cover for their aisle walk-in. And I think the biggest reason that they hired me is because they both used to listen to, and still do now, to be fair, a lot of my like old Bring Me the Horizon covers. So I re-recorded them. Can You Feel My Heart? Like I made it a bit more like modern, like, just re-recorded it and stuff. It sounds very different to what it did like 8 years ago on YouTube. And that was their first dance song. And yeah, it was awesome. It was so fun.
That's so cool. And I'm assuming that when you are doing a 7 hour drive like that, I always try to pass time with long drives like that. Like, hey, the view will be great. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's one of those drives that, like, okay, cool, at least you have a scenic view, or if it's one of these things where you're like, yep, here's 7 hours of highway.
Yeah, it's the longest drive I've ever done. Normally I'm passenger princess. Like if I ever go anywhere, like I will normally not be driving, not because I don't enjoy it, just because, for example, like my partner might enjoy the drive a bit more. But it was the longest one, and I was fully on my own. And do you know what? Like I actually just really loved podcasts. Like I don't know what it is. I think it's because it's not music, so it's like a constant story. So listening to like a podcast, yeah, I didn't even stop. Originally, my plan was like, right, I'm going to at least have one break and I'll do 2 lots of 6 hour drives, give or take, 2 lots of 3 hour drives, give or take. I just went straight through. It was great. I really enjoyed it. It was fabulous.
That's a champion, being able to drive like that distance and not stop. I've
Yeah.
done those kinds of things before with friends, with family, because I lived in Florida for years and we would come up north to New York to do whatever in Jersey. And, you have the choice of, if you're driving, to do the stops, to, make a trip out of it, or just to do a straight shot of 24 hours. And, when I was younger and my dad was younger and my mom was younger, we used to just do the straight shoot, maybe stop off every like 10 hours or so, and it'd be okay. Long drives, if you have music or you have podcasts or whatnot, different scenario altogether. Yeah.
I think, yeah, like I don't know why I just couldn't really do it with just music alone. So I think you definitely like need a distraction and stuff. We don't do a ton of like super, super long distance drives, as you can imagine. Like when it comes to weddings, it's more difficult because you've got to like bring all of your gear, you've got to do the work, you've got to prep the night before, and then you've got to like normally like stay at a hotel and stuff as well. So it can be like a really long work day.
Yeah, totally. And I don't. I think when people travel, they're just like, man, if you're traveling for music, it's like one of the coolest things in the world. I'm like, oh, it still work.
Yeah.
It still is,
Yeah.
definitely.
And then you've got to like manage like the mental toll that it takes because you have traveled. Like I think the way there was definitely like easier, and the way back probably felt a little bit harder because it was like, great, the work is done. Now I'm just tired.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's talk briefly also about some of the covers that you've continued to do, right? Because I think for a lot of people, we've started to see so many different styles, so many different covers. You've done lots of things, obviously, Sleep Token more recently. And if I'm just taking a quick look through, you've done Paramore also, which, your boy will always be a Paramore fan. I love Paramore. So anyone that does amazing Paramore stuff like you do, please keep that going. Linkin Park also, which
Yes.
I'm always very happy about, because, again, huge Linkin Park fan, and I think that Emily has done a great job filling in and becoming part of that band. So again, you have great choices in what you've done. You obviously put your own spin on them, which is great. For you, when you're choosing covers that you do on socials, I know that there's an element of what's out right now, but you seem to run the gamut of all these different covers. Is there a bit of a process for you in terms of what you choose to do longer form of, what you choose to do shorter form of? Walk us through a little bit of like why you've chosen some of the songs that you've chosen, and if you've seen that you've been like, hey, these are ones I enjoy a bit more than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a combination of like it has to like it has to tick like a bunch of boxes, right? So it has to be a song that I genuinely enjoy, because it's going to be rubbish if it's not a song that I enjoy. It could be a song that maybe like has screams in it, but I can still be creative with it, because like, there's kind of like, I feel like there's a bit of a divided part of the internet where people think that when you do covers, it either has to be they either think that you're trying to be as good as or better than the original, or you're trying to replace the original in some way. And there are people that think if it's not going to be close to the original, it has to be completely like a whole different, unique take on the track. And I always, every now and then in my comments, I always say to people like, that musicians are just people that enjoy music, right? Like I never have to, just because I've done a cover, it doesn't mean that I'm not trying to be Hayley Williams. I'm not trying to be Emily Armstrong. I just like music as well. Like that is a completely reasonable reason to choose a song and sing it. So like enjoyment, I think has to be like number one for me. But every now and then, like for example, let's take Sleep Token as an example. Like, they've just released music. They've got a really great album that everyone is loving. There are some songs of theirs that I really like. There are some songs of theirs that I just can't get behind. And that's just personal preference. If there's a song that is like the most recent one that I did, that would be, I think I've done quite a few takes of, I've forgotten the name of it now, but it's on the tip of my tongue and I can see it in my head.
Emergence.
No, the other one. There's something else as well that I've done. Is there something else that I've done, or is it just Emergence?
You've probably done other things.
I've done quite a few, yeah. But let's use like Damocles as an example. So with Damocles, like I've done a cover with a friend and we decided to go an octave up in the chorus. And that was just because loved his piano and it was fun to go an octave up. There are other songs of Sleep Tokens that I've done where like I'll keep the original key and I typically have a lower than normal voice for a woman. But I'm not saying that I am the lowest speaking person, but generally my tone is quite low, which is why it's fun, because it's like, I don't know, someone else might sing it and they might be like, oh, that's a pretty low song. And I'm like, here, let me try that. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you're listening to it and you're like, oh, I'll try that. Like, you know, I don't have to change the key of their songs. Like, I can sing it fine. And so it's fun just to try that out. But even as like we're talking, I think we were talking about like video game music, and my head, as we were having that conversation, pinged and went, hasn't Evanescence recently done an anime intro song? And I think I've heard it, but I wouldn't be able to like recall it. And so my head is like just parked a little note going, you know what, maybe I'll cover that, maybe I'll listen to it, and if I like it, I'll cover that later, because it sparks interest in all the things that I like anime, video gamey-esque things, love Evanescence, female singer, like I want to try that. And like, you know, there's also an element of, when it, you know, going back to the Sleep Token songs again, is there enough in this? Do I like this track enough that I can be creative with it? Can I change things? Can I instinctively listen to it and go, oh, that would be cool trying this? Like sometimes I'll just like sing a random riff, or like if I'm working on a track, I might just be like, I don't know, downstairs, and I'll just get my phone out and I'll sing a random riff and be like, oh, we could change that to this. And that's kind of how I used to do my covers anyway, by like making tweaks and little melodic changes to things.
I love that. And, you know, you talk about something like Sleep Token too, and you're like, hey, my voice is a little bit lower and things like that. It's one of those things that also gives you a bit of a unique edge to be able to try different things too. You know, I think that there's a lot of cover acts out there who just do the cover, right? They just do the thing. But like, I think when you can really make it your own, like you have with a lot of these songs, even if it's very much in the style of what it previously was, it gives you that difference, right? That people can come back to and they're like, oh yeah, like this person did it really, really well in their own style. But really, you're just doing it as you would. And I think that that's really cool too. And the Sleep Token stuff is awesome. I am somebody who's starting to get into Sleep Token. I am somebody that can name like one or two songs and that's it. And people are going to me. That's totally cool, because I need to be flamed because they're great. They're awesome. So, you know, it's one of these things where there's so much music out there, and it's just like, again, you can do your take on all of them in that way. I've got two more questions for you, and then we'll head on out of here. So the first one I ask everybody, even people who aren't into wrestling so much right now, are, if you had to put together one or two matches of musicians for a wrestling card being matches for a show, right? What would those matches be? Let's do two.
Okay. Can you give me an example so I know what I'm, so because I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit confused.
But yeah, all good. So if you had to put together a show where it was wrestling matches featuring musicians, who would they be?
So the musicians are the wrestlers.
Yeah, like one
Okay.
has been a tag team match pitting Trivium versus Bullet for My Valentine.
Ooh.
For many reasons, but just so you kind of get the context of what that is.
Okay, one of them would be Linkin Park, because I had this conversation with someone the other day. Let's say Linkin Park and Evanescence, because I feel like, and let's ignore the fact that they both have female singers for now. I feel like they're both like legacy bands. And when I say legacy bands, I mean bands of that era who were like, you know, early 2000s, and they were and they're still here to this day doing the awesome music.
I can get with that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I can get with that. And how about one more?
Yeah. Okay. Let's do someone current. I had an idea that popped into my head, but I don't feel like that would work. Okay. We'll use on the spot. Okay. Spirit Box and Dayseeker.
Oh, okay. Spirit Box versus Dayseeker. I can do that. I'm all about Spirit Box right now too. After the Jimmy Kimmel
So
performance,
good.
like, yeah,
Yeah. Incredible.
automatically I'd want to ref that match because I would totally be on the side of Spirit Box. I'm not cutting any corners, guys. I would totally be in their corner, give them all of the things. That was weird. But I would totally be in their corner. I would be like, "Hey, you want to use this? You want to do this?"
Go
I
for
don't
it.
see anything.
Yeah.
Great. So what is happening to my voice now? Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Cool. There we go. So, last question before we get out of here. I ask all the people who come on this show, if you had to create a playlist for Spotify with 3 songs that represent you, what would those songs be?
Linkin Park in the end. Spirit Box, Blessed Be. And it'd probably be a bit of a cheat to use one of my own songs.
You can. People
Okay.
have.
We'll do Adeline, The Hardest Part. Yeah.
Cool. I'm all into that. Yeah, no, people have used their own. And also, you hit those very quickly. A lot of people are just like, this is the hardest question I'm asked ever.
Do you know what it is? Again, like, Linkin Park, like, they were like the first band that got me into like rock music and everything. And I saw them very recently, and it was an awesome experience. So like, they are one of like my ride or dies. Spirit Box are a band that I only really got into maybe like a few years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer. But like, they represent like so much of what I do in music as well. Like a mixture of like all of like the harsh and the rock and also the ambience, and then the melodicness of Courtney. And then Adeline, The Hardest Part, I think is a really good example of the kind of original work that I do as me as a musician. So pretty rounded there. I may have struggled with the match, but I knew what the answer was there.
I love that. Well, Christina, thank you so much for spending some time today and chatting about all things. You are a very diverse person, and I love the fact that you do so many things in the music industry. And I think it's important for people to know about all those different things. I think it's important for musicians who are listening to be like, hey, there's lots of different ways to do this. And I think for anyone listening who's not a musician, it's just cool to be able to showcase, hey, you don't just do one thing, you do so many. So thank you for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.